Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. Listen, we are about to decode a manual from the 1920s that claims it can map out your entire destiny using nothing but geometry and math. We are talking about astrology, how to make and read your own horoscope, by the famous and somewhat controversial astrologer Sepharial. And before you roll your eyes, he argues this isn't magic, it's a science of vibrations. We are going to cover how planets allegedly alter your physical face shape, how to calculate the line of least resistance so you stop wasting your life, and why the position of Saturn might be the very specific reason you have terrible friends.
It is a fascinating look at how people tried to, systematize fate. It's less about crystal balls and much more about calculus.
Exactly. So let's set the stage here. We are looking at a text published around 1920.
That's right.
The author goes by the name Sepharial, which already sounds a bit mysterious, like a stage magician. But the book itself is, well, it's surprisingly dry and technical.
Oh, very much so. It's full of tables and degrees.
Right off the bat, I get the sense that this isn't the kind of horoscope you read in the back of a tabloid magazine while waiting for your dentist appointment. This feels heavier.
No, not at all. Sepharial is very, very clear about that distinction. He is dealing with what is technically called genethliacal astrology.
Genethliacal astrology. That is a mouthful.
It is. It's also known as the doctrine of nativities. He's not interested in vague platitudes like, you will have a nice day, or you might meet a stranger.
Oh.
He frames this entire book as a defense of astrology, as a legitimate, hard science, something comparable to chemistry or physics. He's writing this essentially as a textbook.
Like a textbook for a university that didn't exist.
Exactly. That's a perfect way to put it.
That's the vibe I got. He sounds almost defensive, or at least very insistent, that this is rigorous stuff. He keeps trying to distance himself from the mystics and the fortune tellers.
Well, he has to be. You have to remember the context. He's writing in the early 20th century, a time of just massive scientific advancement.
Right. Everything is changing.
We're post-industrial revolution. Quantum mechanics is just around the corner. Radio waves are being understood. The world is becoming obsessed with invisible forces. And Sepharial argues that if you accept the principles of Isaac Newton, and if you accept the solidarity of the solar system, that everything is connected by gravity and force, you cannot logically deny astrology.
Wow.
He puts it quite boldly.
Yeah.
He says astrology is capable of mathematical demonstration.
That's a massive claim. I mean, usually when we hear astrology, we think belief, faith, maybe a bit of psychology. We don't think.
Mathematical demonstration.
No.
So our mission today is to unpack what he calls the alphabet of the heavens. We're going to see how he proposes we can map out human destiny using this mix of math, geometry, and, well, intuition.
That's right.
But let's start with that scientific justification. How does he actually justify this? Does he have a mechanism?
He does, and this is really the core of it. Sepharial leans heavily on what we might call a vibration theory.
He draws a direct parallel to the study of atoms, which was very cutting edge at the time. He says, look at an atom. It has a free path of vibration, meaning it moves, it has activity, it has a certain level of independence.
Sure, it's not static.
But, and this is the key, it is still subject to the general laws controlling the body of which it is a part.
Okay, let's unpack this because this is the foundation of his whole argument. So he's saying humans are kind of like atoms.
Precisely. It's a scale argument. He argues that humans have free will. He doesn't deny that. He's not a total fatalist.
Well, that's interesting.
But that this will operates within a restricted path, and that path is subject to planetary laws.
How, though?
He calls it electrostatic effects. The argument is that planetary bodies create electrostatic conditions on Earth, literally changing the atmosphere and the ether. And since we are physical beings living on Earth, comprised of atoms ourselves,
we're subject to those vibrations, like a compass needle is subject to a magnet.
That is the analogy. It's not that the planets are gods sitting on clouds pulling strings.
No, it's not mythological.
It's a physical interaction. It's environmental. If the atmospheric pressure drops, your old knee injury hurts.
Right.
In his view, if Mars is in a certain position, the electrostatic tension rises and you get angry. It's that kind of logic. And this leads to one of the most compelling concepts in the book, something he calls the line of least resistance.
I love this part. It felt like a life hack from 1920. It sounds like something you'd hear in a modern productivity seminar,
It really is timeless. Sepharial argues that nature always follows the path of least resistance. Think of a lightning bolt striking the ground. Doesn't draw a straight line. It zigs and zags. Why? Because it's finding the path through the air that offers the least resistance. Or think of a river winding its way to the sea.
Right, water doesn't decide to flow uphill just to prove a point. It flows where the ground allows it to flow. It's just physics.
Exactly. And Sepharial applies this to human destiny. He says the purpose of astrology isn't just to predict the future for the sake of it. It's not a parlor trick.
It's not for entertainment.
Its purpose is to show an individual their specific line of least resistance.
That makes so much sense. I mean, how many people do we know who spend years just banging their heads against a wall trying to be a musician or a banker or whatever, when everything about them, their personality, their talents, their patience levels, just screams that they should be doing something else?
That is exactly the waste Sepharial wants to prevent. He calls it social economy. He would say that person is fighting their stars. They are trying to force a path of high resistance.
It's like swimming upstream?
It is. You can do it, technically, but you will be exhausted and you won't get very far. The whole goal of casting the horoscope is to identify what the vibrations have specialized you for, so you can stop wasting energy on the impossible.
It's essentially efficiency engineering for your soul. You're just looking for the current so you can float with it.
That is a wonderful way to put it. And he notes that this isn't some new idea. He goes way back to Chinese history to prove the seriousness of this craft. He mentions the year 2154 BC.
Oh, the story of Hi and Ho. This was a great little historical detour.
Yes. Hi and Ho, these were the royal astrologers to the Chinese emperor. The text says they neglected their duties.
Which, reading between the lines, is a polite way of saying they probably got drunk and forgot to look at the sky.
That is the likely interpretation. They were perhaps enjoying the perks of the job a little too much. And because they weren't paying attention, they failed to predict a solar eclipse on the 10th of October.
Now today, if we miss an eclipse, it's just a bummer because we missed a cool photo op. But back then...
In 2154 BC China, an eclipse was a terrifying cosmic event, a world-ending omen.
Right, the dragon eating the sun.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the result was total chaos. The people ran around in utmost consternation. It destabilized the whole kingdom because the emperor was supposed to be the link between heaven and earth.
And for this failure, Hi and Ho were executed.
They were.
Talk about high-stakes employment. Predict the eclipse or lose your head. But I think Sepharial includes this to establish that for thousands of years, this wasn't seen as a hobby. It was a matter of state security.
Correct. It legitimizes the lineage of the practice. So having established that this is serious science, in his view, and that the stakes are high, Sepharial moves to the tools. He calls it the alphabet of the heavens.
Let's get into the players, the planets. Because he describes them almost like characters in a play, but he also links them to very specific physical traits. This is the part where I started looking in the mirror to see if I fit the description. It's almost like a Victorian personality test.
It is what is known as physiognomy judging character from physical appearance.
Yeah.
It was very popular in the 19th and early 20th centuries.
And he's dead serious about it.
Oh, completely. Sepharial is very specific here. He believes the planetary vibration at birth literally molds the bone structure and the flesh. It's not just a metaphor. Let's start with Neptune.
The planet of chaos.
Chaos, but also genius. It's the planet of the intangible, the unseen. Sepharial describes Neptune types as having a highly strung, nervous temperament. Physically, he says they look thin, nervous, usually with blue eyes, soft, silky hair, and this is the specific detail that sticks with me, wearing a strained or startled look.
A startled look, like they've just seen a ghost. Or like a deer in headlight.
Exactly. Or like they are tuning into frequencies the rest of us just can't hear. Neptune is associated with neurosis and genius. It's the planet of the mystic and the medium. They look permanently on edge because, in his theory, their nervous system is vibrating at a higher frequency. They are hypersensitive receptors.
Wow, okay. What about Uranus?
Uranus is the eccentric, the revolutionary, the inventor. It represents sudden changes and instability.
The disruptor.
Yes. Physically, the Uranus type is described as tall, wiry, and energetic. They are the people who just can't sit still. They are erratic in movement and erratic in thought. If Neptune is the dreamer, Uranus is the mad scientist.
Then we have Saturn. I feel like Saturn always gets a bad rap in astrology. It's always the villain, the buzzkill.
Saturn is the stabilizer, but also the restrictor. It relates to the osseous system, the bones. It's about obstruction, cold, and chills.
Not a fun guy at the party.
Not at all. Sepharial says the Saturn type is dark, lean, with small, deep-set eyes and a sallow complexion.
So if you look tired, bony, and a bit pale, you're a Saturn. That's rough.
But in this system, yes. It represents a lack of vitality, a heaviness, a gravity. It's the lead weight of the zodiac.
So who's the opposite?
Contrast that with Jupiter. Jupiter's a great benefic, the good guy. It brings joviality, abundance, expansion, and success. The text has this great line: a person never goes under if they have a strong Jupiter.
I want a strong Jupiter. What do they look like?
Full-bodied,
Yeah.
robust, high foreheads, rich brown hair. They just look successful. They take up space. They look like the person who buys the whole bar a round of drinks.
Okay, let's do a couple more. Mars. I'm guessing that's not a subtle one.
Not at all. The militant. Energy, impulse, fevers, and the muscular system. The Mars type has a ruddy complexion, red in the face, is very strong, and here is the kicker, is likely to have a mark or scar in the face.
A scar in the face. That is hyper-specific.
It implies a life of action and perhaps a bit of recklessness. If you are ruled by Mars, you are diving headfirst into things. Eventually, you're going to hit something. It's the sign of the warrior.
And finally, Venus. The opposite of Mars, I assume.
Venus is the unifier, peace, art, pleasure. The Venus type is elegant, with dimples, fine teeth, and short, fleshy hands.
Short, fleshy hands.
Yeah.
It's fascinating that he links planetary positions to things like the length of your fingers or a scar on your chin. It seems so deterministic, like your biology is just a printout of the sky.
It goes back to that vibration theory. If the planetary rays affect the atoms of your body at the moment of birth, it shapes the physical mold you grow into. He sees the body as the physical manifestation of the horoscope. You wear your chart on your face.
So, listener, next time you're on the bus or the subway, take a look around, see if you can spot the startled Neptune or the scarred Mars. It's a fun game, if nothing else.
But maybe don't stare too hard at the Mars types.
Yeah, they might want to fight. Good advice. But the planets are just the actors. We also need the stage. That brings us to the zodiac signs and the houses.
Exactly, the architecture of the horoscope.
Right. We all know the signs Aries, Taurus, Gemini, but Sepharial groups them in ways I hadn't really thought about. He talks about constitution.
Yes. He moves beyond just the earth, air, fire, water elements. He talks about how the energy behaves. He divides them into movable, fixed, and flexed, sometimes called mutable.
What's the difference? Why does that matter?
It tells you the quality of the person's action. A fixed sign, like Leo or Taurus, is stable, stubborn, enduring. They hold the ground. Once they decide something, they don't change.
They're anchors.
Right. A movable sign like Aries or Libra is active, initiating, they start things. They are the engine. The flex signs, like Gemini, are adaptable. They can go with the flow.
And again, he ties this to the body in very unflattering ways sometimes. He mentions that Capricorn produces a scraggy neck and weak knees.
Well, Libra produces the highest types of beauty.
Totally unfair to Capricorns, honestly. But let's talk about the houses, because this is where the line of least resistance actually plays out in life. The sky is divided into 12 pie slices, right?
Correct. The 12 celestial houses. He explains this using the concept of the prime vertical. Basically, a circle dividing the heavens. Think of them as 12 departments of life.
Okay.
The planets move through them, and where they land tells you where the energy plays out. So if Mars, the planet of conflict, is in your 4th house, which is the home,
You fight with your family.
that's the idea.
So run us through the heavy hitters. Which houses matter most in this text?
Well, first house is you, your personal appearance, your identity. The second house is finance and movable effects, your stuff.
Okay, straightforward so far. My money, my car.
Then it gets darker. The 4th house rules the residence, the home, but also the end of life. It shows how your life concludes.
How it concludes. Ominous.
The 6th house is health and servants.
Servants.
It was 1920. It rules those who work for you, but also hygiene and small animals. Then the 8th house is the house of death and legacies, wills, inheritances.
And the 12th house is perhaps the most ominous of all.
It is. It rules ambushes, restraints, imprisonment, and secret enemies.
Ambushes. That sounds like warfare, not just someone gossiping about you.
Or social betrayal. If you have malefic planets in the 12th house, Sepharial warns you to watch your back. It is the house of self-undoing. It's where things are hidden from you, or where you hide things from yourself.
So we have the actors, planets, and the stage houses. Now we need the script. That's the aspects, right? The geometry of it all.
This is part 4, the geometry of fate. And this is where the math really comes in. Sepharial explains that planets aren't just good or bad on their own. It depends entirely on the angle they form with one another.
This is the trine and square stuff. Can you break that down for us in a way that doesn't require a protractor?
Sure. Imagine you are standing in the center of a circle. If someone is standing 120 degrees away from you, that's a trine. They are in a harmonious position. They can see you clearly, but they aren't in your face. It's an easy flow of energy. A sextile 60 degrees is similar.
So those are the good angles. They represent opportunity and ease.
Yes. The bad ones are the square, which is 90 degrees, and the opposition, 180 degrees.
Okay, what do they feel like?
A square is friction. It's like someone coming at you from a side street, T-boning you at an intersection. It's a challenge you have to overcome. An opposition is a direct confrontation, a tug of war. Someone is standing directly across the circle from you.
So here's where it gets really interesting to me. You could have a bad planet like Saturn, the restrictor, but if it's at a good angle, it's actually helpful.
Yes, and this is a crucial nuance. Sepharial explains that Saturn, if it is in a good aspect, like a trine, produces stability, patience, and sure, slow success. It grounds you. It turns that restriction into discipline.
But a good planet like Jupiter, the party guy, can go rogue.
Exactly. If Jupiter's in a bad aspect, say 90 degrees to the sun, it doesn't become malicious, but it becomes excessive. It leads to profligacy, extravagance, and waste. You have too much of a good thing, and it ruins you.
You gamble it all away.
Or you overpromise and underdeliver. You become unreliable because you've expanded too far too fast.
So it's not just Saturn equals doom. It's Saturn at a 90-degree angle to Mars equals obstacles and frustration. It's a language.
Precisely. It's the geometry that dictates the quality of the influence. The planet provides the raw material. The angle determines how it's built.
Okay, let's apply this. Part 5. Judgment and prediction. How do we read a life? Sepharial breaks this down into categories like health, money, and marriage. Let's start with health. He makes a distinction between the constitution and the health. Aren't those the same thing?
Not to an astrologer of this period.
Yeah.
The sun rules the constitution. That's your organic hereditary strength. Think of it as the size of your fuel tank.
Yeah.
Or the chassis of your car.
A fundamental hardware.
Right. The moon rules the health. That's the functional day-to-day operation. That's the engine, the fluids, the moving parts.
So you could have a strong tank but a bad engine, a solid chassis with terrible wiring.
Exactly. You could have a strong sun, which means a good constitution, but an afflicted moon, which means bad health. That person might suffer from a lot of functional issues, colds, stomach aches, minor ailments, but they have the core vitality to survive them and live a long life.
They're squeaky, but they run forever.
That's a great way to put it. Whereas if you have a weak sun but a good moon, you might never get sick, you feel fine day to day, but when you do catch something serious, your system collapses because the underlying vitality isn't there to fight it.
That is a very useful distinction. Now, money. Everyone wants to know about money. How do we find the line of least resistance for getting rich?
Sepharial gives a formula. You look for a planet that is in a good aspect, a trine or a sextile, to the moon, and is elevated, meaning high up in the chart, near the top, close to the midheaven or 10th house.
And that planet tells you what job you should do.
Yes. The sign it is in tells you the kind of trade. And Sepharial lists some very specific and, frankly, some very amusing examples given the time period.
Oh, I saw this list. It's great. If you are an Aries type, you should be a soldier or a pioneer. Standard stuff.
Makes sense. Cancer types. Sailors or publicans, people who run pubs.
Because Cancer is water and liquids. What about Virgo?
Clothes dealers or confectioners.
Sellers of sweets. Okay. And my absolute favorite, Pisces.
This is a classic Sepharial line. Pisces rules dealers in fish, naturally, but also warders of places of confinement.
So prison guards.
Prison guards, hospital wardens, asylum workers. Because Pisces is the sign of the 12th house confinement restriction, hidden things.
So if you're a Pisces and you're wondering why your job at the bank feels so wrong, maybe consider fishmongering or running a jail.
It sounds funny to us, but remember the line of least resistance. He's saying these are the environments where your energy naturally fits. If you are a Pisces, you deal well with isolation, hidden things, and, compassion.
Okay, let's move to love. Marriage. What are the red flags here? How do you avoid disaster?
In a man's chart, you look at the moon and Venus. In a woman's, you look at the sun and Mars. But the key is a concept called the application.
Application means movement, right? Where the planet is headed.
Yes. You look at the significator, say the moon in a man's chart, and see which planet it moves towards next of the zodiac. The planet it applies to describes the partner.
So if my moon is moving towards a well-aspected Venus.
You get a partner who is charming, artistic, and pleasant. It's a smooth ride.
And if it's moving towards Uranus.
Then you might have a problem. Sepharial says Uranus in the 7th house, the house of marriage, or applying to the significator implies sudden divorce or, and I quote, heckling of creditors.
Heckling of creditors. So your marriage leads to financial ruin?
Or just chaos and instability. Uranus is the disruptor. It implies a relationship that cannot settle down. It's exciting, maybe, but you can't build anything stable on it.
He also has a method for spotting enemies, which I found chilling. It's not just about who you don't like, it's mathematical.
It's based on sympathy and antipathy. He says to look at where Saturn or Mars, the malefic planets, are in your own chart. Let's say your Saturn is at 13 degrees of Aquarius.
Okay, Saturn in Aquarius, 13 degrees. That's my point of restriction, my weak spot.
Correct. He says you should avoid anyone whose birthday falls when the sun is in that same degree. So in this example, someone born around February 1st or 2nd.
So if I meet someone at a party, I ask their birthday, and if it hits my Saturn degree, run.
Sepharial would say that person, no matter how nice they seem, will ultimately be a source of obstruction, delay, or loss for you. Their sun shines directly onto your point of restriction. It activates your weakness.
It's like a chemical reaction that can only produce a bad outcome.
That's his view.
Brutal, but useful, I guess. Now, Sepharial doesn't just talk theory. He brings receipts. He uses a case study. Joseph Chamberlain.
Yes, the famous British politician. Born in 1836, Sepharial uses Chamberlain's chart to prove the system works. He uses a very public figure so readers at the time could verify the events of his life.
Smart. Walk us through the analysis. Why was Chamberlain successful, according to the chart?
First, the Constitution. Sun sextile moon. As we discussed, that means excellent recovery powers. He had the core vitality to endure the high stress of politics.
And his character, what made him tick?
The majority of his planets were in cardinal signs. Cardinal signs are the initiators, the movers. This gave him an ambitious pioneer spirit. Sepharial says he was the type who rides roughshod over others.
He wasn't afraid to break things to get his way. Sounds like a politician.
Physically, he had Mercury rising. This gave him a sharp, business-like appearance. And for success. The sun was in conjunction with Jupiter in the second house, the house of money.
Sun and Jupiter together in the money house. That's hitting the cosmic jackpot.
Exactly. High fortune. But the most interesting part is the prediction element. Sepharial claims that specific planetary directions, which are calculated movements of the planets after birth, coincided exactly with Chamberlain's political shifts and even the Boer War.
So he's saying the war started right on schedule, astrologically speaking.
He argues that when the planets aligned in a certain hostile way in Chamberlain's progressed chart, the war began. It wasn't random politics, it was cosmic timing. The chart is a clock, and it just keeps ticking.
Speaking of time, let's talk about part 7, the tools of the trade, transits and eclipses. This is honestly the scary part of the book.
Is where the determinism really kicks in. A transit is when a planet currently in the sky moves over a sensitive point in your birth chart.
And he has some very specific warnings for these.
He does. If Neptune transits your sensitive points, he says to watch out for fraud, ambushes, and simulated death.
Simulated death, what is that?
A trance or a coma. Neptune rules the suspended state. It's not death, but it looks like it. Uranus transits brings sudden catastrophes or accidents with machinery. Saturn brings chills, delays, and depression. It's like a weather forecast for your life, but the weather is mostly storms.
And eclipses, he's not a fan.
Sepharial calls them sinister. He says if an eclipse falls on your birthday, so on your sun's degree or on your ascendant, it portends disaster or health issues that last for 18 months.
18 months. That is a long time to be under a dark cloud.
That's the rule of thumb he gives. He suggests casting a solar revolution, a new chart every year for your birthday, to see if these things are going to be triggered in the year ahead. It's all about being forewarned.
It really emphasizes how precarious life felt back then. You're constantly watching the sky for these cosmic triggers.
But that leads us directly to his conclusion. Why do this? Why live with this constant surveillance of the stars?
Right. Part 8, Conclusion and Philosophy. Sepharial says it's for social economy.
Exactly. It's not for idle curiosity or party tricks. It's to prevent waste. If you know your line of least resistance, you don't waste 10 years trying to be a painter when you should be an engineer.
You don't marry the person whose birthday hits your Saturn degree.
You don't marry the person who will bankrupt you. And you prepare for death. The end of life section is very prominent. It's about understanding the whole cycle.
It's incredibly pragmatic. It's about navigating a dangerous world with what he believed was a map.
And he ends with a thought on intuition versus math. He says the math must be exact if they calculate the degrees correctly, but the successful astrologer needs scientific imagination.
You have to be able to connect the dots.
You have to be able to see the story behind the numbers. It's not enough to just list the parts.
It's a mix of the calculator and the crystal ball.
In a way, yes.
So what does this all mean? We've unpacked the vibrations, the face shapes, the fishmongers, and the eclipses. And here's where it gets really interesting for me. Sepharial is painting a picture of a universe that is incredibly interconnected.
It is a mechanical universe, but a deeply spiritual one. It operates on laws, but those laws apply to the soul just as much as they apply to the atom.
And that leads to our big closing thought. The source suggests that we are all subjects of interplanetary action. We are like those atoms he talked about, vibrating in a set path. If Sepharial is right, and our free will is just a necessity playing out within a restricted path, like a dog on a leash, basically, how much credit can we really take for our successes?
And conversely, how much blame do we really deserve for our failures?
Right. It raises the question, are we the captains of our souls, or are we just really good at navigating the weather? If the wind blows us to greatness, did we do that? Or did we just happen to hoist the sail at the right time?
It's a fundamental question about agency, isn't it?
I want you, the listener, to think about that. Look up your own line of least resistance. Consider if you are fighting against your own stars. Are you swimming upstream when the current is trying to take you somewhere else?
Sometimes the easiest path is the one you were meant to take all along.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. Keep looking up.